Hiya, I'm Claudia, and I'm a St. Mary's Twickenham University graduate. Today, I would like to talk to you about my mom. A woman full of love, a woman full of strength, a very disciplined woman. I remember sharing this small apartment with her in Italy, and it was just me and her. And I would be the one in charge of cleaning the house, uh, cooking, getting all the chores done. And I was very young at that age. I was around 12, and she would be at work. And when she comes back home, she would basically expect the food to be ready. Something that I never understood because my friends were having fun, and I was at home getting all these stuff done. And I remember there was an episode. Was an episode where she basically said, "Oh, Claudia, I'm teaching you all this stuff so that no woman can deceive you." I'm very interested. But it's almost like what she taught me was preparing me for what was to come. I remember moving to London at the age of 18, and now I had to live by myself and combine studies with work and sports. It was really challenging during that time, but I was able to go through it because of what my mom taught me. But what she taught me wasn't even about the chores, the cleaning itself, but just the importance of being disciplined and working hard and taking responsibility. I think I wouldn't have gone this far if I didn't implement those skills. Today, I'm happy to say that I'm a graduate. I funded my own company. Probably these things wouldn't have happened if I wasn't disciplined and I didn't work hard enough and I didn't take responsibilities. I think she prepared me for what was to come. I thank God for her life, and I hope I'll become the man she wants me to be. I still receive phone calls, and she still inspects my room sometimes. She tells me to show her my room, making sure that it's clean. But I really thank her.
Hi everyone. Hope everyone is staying safe during this uncertain time. My name is Christiana Oyinekon. I'm a co-founder of DataByte, and today I'll be talking about the person that influenced me, motivated me, and inspired me today. And that person is my dad, my father. I've learned so much from him that I'm actually blessed. I'm blessed. So, my dad came to the UK, let's say 21 or 22 years ago. And I feel like that's one of the biggest challenges ever because you have to adapt to their culture, to the environment, to the language, meet different kind of people that speak different language, different identity, different faces. And how my dad dealt with it, amazing, fantastic. So, just a quick conversation that me and my dad have most of the time. For example, my dad will say to me, you need to know who you are. You need to discover your identity. You need to discover your true self. Who are you? What am I meant to do? What's my purpose? What's my will? And as a result, if you know yourself, know who you are, you'll be able to identify your pathway, your vision, your goals, where you're heading to. Another areas that me and my dad do talk about is the fact that my dad who said to me, opportunity does not come but once. Opportunity come all the time. It just depends on how you're going to utilize it. It just depends on how you're going to use it based on your decision making. Another area that we do talk about, my dad who said to me, life is full of different things, whether it's misery, joy, happiness, sorrow. We find ourselves in different situations. Sometimes we're very happy, excited, and all of a sudden things happen. And whenever you find yourself in a situation, maybe you're going through some challenge, remind yourself that this is not gonna last long. It's temporary. Those periods are there to fix you, mold you, break you, and as a result to become stronger. As an outcome for me, I've learned so many things. Like I said, the way I think is different. I've got my vision, my goals, what I'm heading to. I know who I am. I mean, I'm not perfect, but I'm still learning. I'm still learning every single day, but I know the right things to do because of the support that I have from my dad, and he believed in me as well. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your love. Thank you for your support. Thank you, Employment in St. Mary's. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Kazimir Thomas, and I will be speaking about my mum for the Hidden Figures and Hidden Histories video. So my mum came to the UK when she was 2 years old. She was born in Dominica, and she has been to Dominica, like in and out of the UK and Dominica in her teenage years. I think the thing that made an impression on me from my mum is probably her hard work, her dedication, and her genuine kindness. I feel like, especially now, it's kind of hard to come across very genuine people, and I'm just lucky that one of those people is my mum. I also think something that made an impression on me growing up, especially in my household, from my mum, was not being defined by, you know, where you're from, who you grew up with, things like that. She's never allowed, you know, me being a black woman or a black child to, you know, block my blessings, or, you know, she doesn't say, oh, you know, law's a difficult profession to get into because you're a black woman. She encourages me wholeheartedly to kind of break the stereotypes that society tries to put on me as a black woman, and I don't think that I've ever felt demotivated or like I couldn't do something, and I think that's solely because my mum has always had the idea that you define your future, you define your profession, you define everything that you want. And I'm just so grateful for that, because it's very easy to get caught up in the mentality that you are not good enough because you're a black woman or a black person in general, or a woman. And I think that this really influenced my identity, because it built me into a strong character. You know, all I've ever known is my mom. So, well, my mom, my aunties, and they're all very strong black women. So there's never been any kind of lasting self-doubt. So I may doubt myself, but it will last for about 2 seconds, and then I'm like, okay, come on, you're gonna do it. So if I, for example, I want to go to Germany for a year abroad, and at first I was like, nah, I'm not gonna do that, you know, it costs too much money, or I was making excuses basically. And my mom was like, are you okay? You need to go to Germany. Like, there's an opportunity here. It's going to help you in your career that you want to do. Why would you not do it? She's never ever been the type to discourage. She's never ever been the type to say, oh, you know, maybe not. No. You know how parents usually say no? I'm like the parent, and she's like the child that's saying, yeah, go do everything you want. It's pretty cool. Most major impact that my mom has kind of had on me is her ability to always give, whether that's advice, whether it's money, whether it's help, her time. She's always giving, even to those who do her wrong. I don't know how she does that, I really don't, but she's always giving, and that is something that's impacted me, because it's made me want to give as well. She has this amazing idea, like, that if she wins the lottery, she wants to contact everybody she's ever encountered. So it doesn't even matter if she's ever spoken to you. If she's even walked past you, she wants to contact those people and give them a bunch of money if she wins the lottery. Now, normal people or the average person would want to sort out, you know, their cars, their bills, their house. We still need to sort out that stuff, but instead of sorting that stuff out first, she wants to go and help other people. And that selflessness is something that I hope I can adopt and, you know, keep adopting and nourishing, and hopefully pass that on to my children, because it is just such a beautiful quality to have. The most defining thing is the thing that I previously mentioned, which is the identity, not being defined by where we're from. So not being, you know, a typical Dominican, or not, you know, living up to the stereotypes of a Jamaican, because I am half Dominican, half Jamaican. And it's strange because some people would say, oh my gosh, I didn't know you were Jamaican. And then I asked them, okay, what does a Jamaican look like? What does a Jamaican sound like? Obviously there's the accent, blah, blah, blah. But it's just funny to see how society tries to put you in a box. And my mum has, you know, just shredded that box, basically.
My gran is my hidden figure. Her name is Ursula Serranash, and she came to England in 1960 at the invitation of the British government, so she's part of the Windrush generation. A mother of 6, life was hard as she had her last 2 children in England, and she talks about looking for a bedsit for the whole family to share, faced with the signage of no dogs, no blacks, no Irish. She inspired and influenced my life in many ways, encouraging me to be the very best version of myself. She would say, always try your best, your very best, and say, always put your best foot forward. Regarding school, she would say, now better come home with a B or a C, you need an A, because them people don't want to give us any job. I developed my hard work ethic from her. Her first husband died, leaving her, as she says, with 6 children. In those days, there were no benefits. She returned to work and acquired 3 houses while working as a nurse in 3 jobs, all at the same time, on the district, on the agency, and in a care home. She sent myself and my sister to private schools, gave us tutoring, music lessons, and everything life had to offer. Nothing was too much for her to give to us. It wasn't plain sailing though. My kids laughed when I told them we had to scrub the kitchen floor and wipe down banisters and polish windows with newspapers during the school holidays and at the weekends. And we didn't vacuum stairs, we used a hand brush. My children shudder at the very thought of it. Even my youngest says the cleaner can pick his toys up. Most importantly though, my gran was realistic with us. She made us aware of how the world would see us. Black first of all, probably not very attractive, but most of all stupid. I know this sounds harsh now, and no, I didn't grow up with a chip on my shoulder. I wasn't really aware of all the racism going on around me at the time, but it made us prepared for adversity we would likely face in later life, and put into perspective the importance of having to work harder and try harder, because we wouldn't be given the benefit of any doubt. Always work harder, do better. We would have to prove ourselves to justify our place in this world. It was a mostly positive experience though. I loved growing up black in London. I love our food, our warm culture. I definitely got my cooking skills from her. We love to play music and party as often as we can. And when I had my children, she said to me, always make sure you feed them with the most nutritional value you can find in the food you give them. My gran has influenced my identity to be an independently thinking and achieving black woman who could do anything well that I put my mind to do. She would say, after all, you're not stupid, what's wrong with you? I'm a West Indian woman born in the UK and raised in my Caribbean traditions of behaviour and values. We believe in discipline and hard work. We also believe in loving life and living well, opening our arms to new experiences and to new people. My behaviour is being impacted by understanding that I must never give up in pursuit of my goals and a higher purpose. I have learned that anything could be achieved from hard work, focus, determination and sacrifice.
Okay, so I've got the pleasure today of talking about my lovely, lovely gran, Mrs. Eileen Rowe. She was born in 1926 in the parish of St. Elizabeth in Jamaica, so a long, long way away. A lot sunnier here than the UK. But yeah, my gran has just been amazing and an amazing influencer in my life, really, since the day I was born. She's without doubt the matriarch of our family and has really achieved so much. You know, like I said, she grew up in this, you know, pretty small parish in Jamaica. She got married at about the age of 17. Sadly, her husband, my granddad, you know, died after only 8 months of them being married, and my gran was only 1 month pregnant with my dad. So pretty horrific thing for a 17-year-old to go through, really. But again, even after all that, my gran picks herself up, and at the age of 26, I believe it was, she came here to the UK all on her own. She talks about coming over, in fact, she speaks really fondly about coming over on the Conyard shipping line that apparently was quite a prestigious, you know, ship to come on at that time. You know, she talks about stopping off in New York, her first experience of a television, her first experience of getting on an escalator, which to me just all seems mad now, because these are things that we just take for granted, but was all new for my gran. You know, her first experience of the UK actually was when the ship docked in Liverpool, and then she gets on a train to Euston and goes to Battersea, and then the rest is history, like they say, really, because she came here, she rented a room, you know, lived a really humble life actually, you know, didn't really know many people, went to work as a seamstress in the East End. Later on, she went to become a nursing assistant at King's College Hospital, and I only really found that out recently, weirdly. But then she then went on to study nursing and was a nurse at Springfield Mental Health Hospital for many, many years. But I think one of the things that really stands out really about my gran is the fact that she, at the age of 94, the ripe old age or the youthful age of 94, is still going, and she's still so strong, and she's survived her 2 husbands. She's you know, she survived sadly 2 of her sons, you know, in her own words, my classmates are dead, you know, so she survived all her classmates, and she's still going strong, you know. And for me, that's really kind of made me have to really look at my gran and say, wow, you know, you are, you know, strong. Obviously, she's been fortunate in that she's got super strong genes. She's been really, really healthy, you know, but I think mentally as well, she's always been a very strong woman, and she certainly got all her faculties about her. You know, you can sit and have a really good discussion with her now, you know. And one funny story she tells, though, I say funny, but also really sad, but she had, you know, a really good family friend at the time, and he was staying with, in her words, a really nice white family. And they had the audacity to ask him one day, oh, so tell us, you know, is it true what they say? Do black people have tails? Now, as you can imagine, he was horrified, but he wanted to, you know, teach them a lesson, really. So apparently the story goes that he stood up and he pulled down his pants and he pointed to his penis and he said, does your husband have one of these? And the lady replied, you could imagine by then she'd probably gone bright red, and she went, yeah, he does. And then, you know, he turned around to show her his bottom, and he said, okay, do you see anything? And she went, no. He said, what, you don't see a tail there? And she went, no. And then he pulled up his pants and he said, well, there you go. Black people and white people, we're no different. So one could say that kind of taught her a lesson, really, and kind of, I suppose, put her in her place. So, you know, my gran has many, many of those stories, and I wish I had the time today to tell them all. But for me, some of the highlights about my gran is the fact that she, you know, she's just got superb memory. So she just remembers everything, you know, from like 50 odd years ago, 60 odd years ago. She just remembers it all, you know. And like I said, she really is a survivor. You know, she went on to have 3 children, you know, 3 lovely children. My uncles and aunt, they're just gorgeous. You know, and she's always worked hard. Another highlight about my gran was the fact that, you know, she really has always understood the value of money and how to budget and how to, you know, put a little aside, you know, or she would say to save for a rainy day. So when COVID hit, you know, my gran was ready. You know, she had her stock at home that would last anyone 2 years. You know, she was sorted, but she's always lived by that sort of philosophy and standard. But also she, you know, as part of the Jamaican culture, there's this kind of sort of saving scheme, if you like, called the Pardner. And it was really a way in which, you know, the West Indian community would help each other to save. So my gran, you know, once a week would collect this money from people, and then, you know, that money, you know, different people could come different week, whoever was in that Pardner, and they could get what they called a draw them times. So, you know, they would get a certain amount of that money that they could use towards buying a house or putting down a deposit for a house or a car or whatever else it wanted them, they wanted to do. But I'd say look it up. It's called the Pardner, and it was really just a way of that community being able to save and to buy the things that they wanted. And I'm really proud of my gran, because 5 years after she came to the UK, her and her husband at the time then were able to buy a house, you know, and in Battersea. And if you look up house prices in Battersea now, and my gran had a house in a really prime spot in Battersea at the time. I only wish she'd kept it. But anywho, you know, so they bought this you know, big house in Battersea, you know, and that was 5 years after she arrived. But that was as a result of them working really, really hard. And I know my gran wouldn't forgive me if I didn't mention the fact that when she also first came here in 1952 to the UK, you know, it was ration time. So, you know, they only had a limited supply of food that they could actually buy or that they could get from the supermarkets, because it was free, you know, the ration obviously, and then anything else on top of that you had to buy. But the point was, you know, one had to really learn how to humble themselves and perhaps to, you know, live off of foods, you know, or very little food really at the time, you know, but she managed and got through that, you know. So again, really showing my gran's resilience. So there was a couple of questions that Obi asked me to think about in putting this video together, and one of them was, how does it make me feel, you know, based on my gran's experience, about the environment in which I myself have been raised? Well, if I'm really honest, I'm so grateful that my gran and others came to the UK when they did, because it kind of paved the way for me and others really to be able to get the education that we got, the, you know, the work opportunities that we've been able to attain, and really, you know, the life that we live now, the life that I've been able to afford now, you know, I think is you know, part of that is because of the price that you like, if you want, that my gran paid when she came here, you know. So I would say that there's that. So I really am grateful, and at the same time I really do embrace my you know, my Jamaican heritage as well as my British heritage. And that really, I suppose, falls into another question that Obi asked me to consider when putting this video together, is how has my gran's experience formed my identity, or, you know, who I am now? And I would say that it's had a huge impact on my identity, obviously, because I've grown up always knowing about, you know, my Jamaican heritage. I've grown up eating Jamaican food. You know, I've grown up speaking and hearing patois. I absolutely love the Jamaican patois, you know, and again, really, I think just seeing strong women like my gran, my mum, you know, has helped me to be, I think, the strong person that I am today, and with the, you know, values that I have today, strong family values, strong faith, you know, generosity of spirit, humility, you know, resilience. You know, I think a lot of that is as part of seeing people like my gran really, and having those people around me. And then finally, you asked, you know, what has been the most major impact on my life and my behaviour when I, you know, see people like my gran and spend time with my gran. And for me, I think I've had a lot of time, especially, you know, before putting this video together, to think about that. And I think one of the biggest impacts really has been the fact that my gran, when I look at her, not only do I see this strong woman, but I see someone who is really a soul survivor. You know, she's been through so much, you know, the deaths of her husbands and so much tragedy, you know, but she's still standing. And I think it's because my gran's philosophy really is kind of, you know, like, when life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. And as cliche as that all is, but my gran really epitomizes that. You know, you go through stuff, but then you kind of have to find a way to, you know, pick yourself back up, dust yourself back down, and keep going. And my gran's done that. And why? Because she, you know, to enable her to live the sort of life, or the quality of life that she wants to have. And I spoke to her really just a couple of days ago, and she was like, you know what, Sonia, I'm sat at home, you know, I'm not going to worry myself over anything. I'm having a nice glass of wine, you know, and I'm just going to enjoy the day. And that really now, after all those years of hard work, you know, my gran can now do that. And I pray that when I get to her age, God willing, that I also will be able to just kind of just sit back and just enjoy my glass of wine and say, do you know what, it's all good. So again, I just thank my gran for coming here, paving the way, and for all the amazing values that she's taught me in that time. So thank you, Gran. God bless.
Hello, my name is Obi. I'm a careers consultant here at St. Mary's, and my hidden figure is my mother, Ngozi Oputa. Ngozi is an Igbo word, so Igbo is a tribe in Nigeria, and my mother's name means blessing. And my mother has very much been a blessing to us, my siblings, myself and my siblings, and to pretty much anybody who have had the privilege to get to know her. With that, my mother is a formidable and strong-willed woman, very, very much a strong Nigerian woman. My mother came to England for the first time in the 1970s, and this was because she'd run away, and she'd run away. My grandfather actually was quite wealthy, and he had 2 houses in London where my mum's older brothers and sister lived whilst they received a very privileged British education. But my grandfather had refused to send my mum to London to receive an education, to get a degree, because when my auntie had finished her studies, she refused to marry a man that my grandfather had wanted her to marry. So my grandfather said, well, if education makes a woman think for themselves, then he wasn't going to have that. So he was going to pull my mother out of education. And he did. And in response, my mother ran away and refused to marry the man that my grandfather had found her. She made her way across West Africa, so when going to Benin, Togo, Senegal, working. I don't know how she did it. Just working in, and eventually get enough money to make her way to Germany, where she stayed with her brother, and then go into London. And London was for her, I suppose, this place was something that her father didn't want her to experience. And so for her, it was a place of redemption, a place of, of coming and, defiance almost. And she loved London. And she got herself a diploma in fashion, and lived in a hostel and worked in a cinema and in a petrol station, she said, and she stayed here for a few years before she eventually moved to America, where she met my dad, and then I came along, and that was another story. But London was a country where she could be herself. She talked about the racism that she felt and she experienced, but she always said that didn't bother her, because she had come here with a purpose, and she'd come to find herself. So whatever she experienced didn't mean anything to her. It didn't matter to her. And plus, she said, she grew up quite privileged, and she grew up with a family that was quite wealthy. So she knew who she was, and she knew what her self-worth was. And coming from a country like Nigeria, where predominantly everybody was black and African, she didn't have a sense of shame in being black. So when people call her and be racist towards her, she'd be like, I have a better life. I had a better life than you. My father was pretty wealthy, and my father is pretty wealthy. So that was kind of her attitude, quite a little bit arrogant, I think. But she had that confidence in who she was, and I think that's a confidence that follows and continues to follow her through her life. And I think we inherited that confidence, myself and my siblings. My mum came back here in '89 after my father died, and with 5 kids. She was a widow with 5 kids, and she came here. And again, London was again somewhere where she could find herself, where she could start again, and she could realign her life And UK offered her that opportunity, offered her and her children the opportunities to for more. And it was a tough life. We were very poor, and she had 5 mouths to feed, and she worked here and there in a cheese factory, and sewing clothes for people. And life was pretty tough, but she loved this country. She loved the opportunity she got. She loved the fact that she was able to be here, and she recognized the privilege and opportunity that she had in doing so. And she pretty much raised us up to be a part of this country, to contribute, and in that she did her part for this country. She'd raised citizens, as you were, and people who would feed into the fabric of this country. And I like to think that in my job and what I do and who I am, it is, and how I contribute to this country, and it was all because of her and all because of what she's given me. Going back to school and getting a degree has always been my mother's dream, because that was something that she never had, and I think it was such a pivotal thing in her life. So in about 2011, she enrolled in Roehampton University to get a theological degree, to study theology. About 13 months later, Mum had a stroke, and a massive stroke, and she was diagnosed with dementia, and she wasn't able to continue her studies after a year or so. So I actually wrote into the university, and they managed to get her an exit certificate, and amazingly enough, they even agreed to have her graduate with the rest of her class 2 years later, in which she did. And the picture I picked is of her on that graduation day, and the picture tells me of what is possible and speaks to me about resilience and courage. And I think that's something that she's imbued all of us with, my siblings and I. And it is also wanting to be a part of life in all its way, in all its glory. And it's that thing that home and belonging was where you wished it to be, and that was in how she raised us to think of England and the UK as home and belonging, and that whatever we went through, no matter how different people made us to feel, they could not determine and they could not influence how we felt and how much that we were part of this country. She taught me that home and belonging was as much as you being welcomed, as much as you also opening your arms to embrace it and welcome it into yourself. It was not just conditioned in someone else welcoming you, you also had to welcome it. So for that, I'm grateful to be British and African, and both at the same time, easily both at the same time, and she's afforded me that opportunity, and she's given me the opportunity to have a life, a good life, an opportunity to be part of a wonderful country, I think, in many ways, and still retaining who I am as a Black African person.
Good evening, my name is Melanie Healy, and I want to talk to you tonight about my hidden figure, my mum, my hero really, Edith Onita Curtin. My mum came from Barbados in 1962 to England as part of a recruitment drive that was happening all over the Caribbean, recruiting people to come and work in England. My mum was one of 13 children, and she left formal education when she was 12 years old because she had to look after her younger brothers and sisters after her mum died when she was quite young and her dad remarried. My mum met my dad at the harbour as she was about to board the boat to come to England. My dad was leaving also. He was recruited as he was a carpenter, and she also met who was to become her best friend and my godmother, also travelling on the same boat. The journey was 4 or 5 weeks, and by the time they got here, they were all really, really close friends. And actually, in coming over, it was very common that by the time they got here, they formed such strong friendships that those friendships were going to last them for years and years and years to come. 40, 50 years, lifetime of friendships were formed in that journey coming here to this new place. My mum and dad arrived in December. It was freezing cold, and I remember my mum telling me that her hands and feet had never hurt her so much from the cold. She'd never known such pain. My mum was coming over originally to live with her older brother, who was already here, who actually was part of the Windrush generation. But things didn't really work out, and she ended up sharing a house with my dad and her best friend. And at the time, it wasn't as we think about sharing a house, it was sharing rooms. So my mum shared a room with her best friend, and my dad was sharing a room with his cousin. And at the time, it was very commonplace for the people from the Caribbean to come over and share a house where 2 or 3 of them would be sharing a room together. They formed really strong communities, and they had to. Like I said, they formed friendships that lasted a lifetime, because when they came here, it wasn't just the weather that was inhospitable, but it was the people. They weren't wanted here by the British people. They weren't wanted. They were called names. There were signs up outside of shops and clubs and pubs and restaurants saying no coloureds, no Irish and no dogs, or no blacks, no Irish and no dogs. And that was quite commonplace. They were spat on, they were shouted at in the street, they were called names. It was horrendous. They were treated badly at work. They were called all sorts of things. I don't even want to say some of the things they were called. Some of the stories, my mum was training to be a nurse, so she came over being recruited as a nurse, and she actually later left the profession because of the treatment. They were expected to do all the dirty jobs, cleaning the toilets, nothing that really had anything to do with actual nursing. By the people that she was trying to care for, she was told, don't touch me, you're dirty, I don't want that dirty colour, that dirt rubbing off on me. They were told some horrible things. My mum had trained to be a chef before leaving Barbados, and she went back to that profession actually. She left nursing and went back to that profession. And like I said, she left school when she was 12, so she broke her formal education. But my mum worked hard and she studied. I watched my mum study and get all her chef qualifications, and later on when me and my sister came along, she worked as a school cook running a school kitchen, and when we left school, my mum then went back to sort of chefing and worked at the BBC Broadcasting House in Regent Street running the kitchen there. My mum worked really hard for everything. She instilled in me a kind of pride that I can only tell you a small part about. I am the woman I am today because of my mum. My mum was my inspiration. She worked and studied and taught herself. And like I said, then it ended up running the kitchen in the BBC. But more than that, my mum scrimped and saved to make sure that we as her children had a strong sense of identity. We knew where we came from, and we had a pride in who we are and who we were. And in who we are, who we were about to become. My mum made sure that we went home every year, so we went back to Barbados every single summer we spent in Barbados. She scrimped and she saved to make sure that we could do that. And she did that because she wanted us to know where we were from and to have a pride in who we are as people.